Everyone expected Victor Wembanyama to be just another young star looking up to LeBron. But after LeBron appeared on his podcast and suggested that players in this era are better than the players from Jordan's era, Wembanyama finally lost his patience and made a statement that is now set to divide the entire league into two sides. Wait until you hear whose side Shaq and Charles Barkley are on. I am telling you right now, the moment I saw that clip of LeBron James, I knew the internet was about to go into a full-scale meltdown. I am talking about the episode of the Mind the Game podcast, where LeBron sat down with Tyrese Halliburton and claimed that playing 82 games in the 80s and 90s was actually easier than it is today because the game was slower and the spacing was not as complex as what he deals with now.
Because the game is different. Like, I want people to understand and our fans to understand that playing 82 games in the 80s and 90s is not the same as playing 82 games in the 2020s.
Everyone expected Victor Wembanyama to simply be another young star looking up to LeBron. But after LeBron appeared on his podcast and suggested that players in this era are better than those from Michael Jordan's era, Wembanyama finally lost his patience and made a statement that is now set to divide the entire league into two camps. Wait until you hear which side Shaq and Charles Barkley are on. I am telling you right now, the moment I saw that clip of LeBron James, I knew the internet was about to go into a full-scale meltdown. I am talking about the episode of the Mind the Game podcast, where LeBron sat down with Tyrese Halliburton and claimed that playing 82 games in the 1980s and 1990s was actually easier than it is today because the game was slower and the spacing was not as complex as what he deals with now. That it honestly feels like he is trying to rewrite the history books in real time just to make his own longevity look more impressive. But fans saw right through it because that episode didn't just ruffle a few feathers. It became one of the most heavily criticized moments in the podcast's history, with even some of his most loyal supporters struggling to defend it. LeBron described the 80s as crowded and slow. But if you actually look at the data from the mid to late 1980s, like the 1986 and 1987 seasons, the pace of play was significantly higher than what the league is producing in 2026. Teams were running the floor constantly, playing at a relentless tempo while absorbing far more physical contact, often with far fewer foul calls than players receive today. LeBron also pointed to modern spacing as a reason the game is harder. But critics argue he ignores how different the conditions were back then, from travel schedules to recovery resources. Players in that era were flying commercial, staying in standard hotels, and dealing with a far more physically punishing style of defense without the benefit of today's advanced recovery systems, private jets, and customized training facilities. For many fans, this comparison feels like an attempt to reshape the narrative around modern load management, making today's rest patterns seem justified by overstating the difficulty of the current game. Think about the physical toll of that era as well, with legends like Michael Jordan and Magic Johnson playing at an intense pace while wearing shoes that offered minimal support compared to modern performance footwear. And yet they did it without cryotherapy chambers, personalized chefs, or the kind of scientific recovery infrastructure that today's stars rely on. That contrast is exactly why the debate has become so heated, especially after reactions reportedly came not just from veteran players like Shaq and Charles Barkley, but also from younger stars. Wembanyama in particular is said to have taken issue with the tone of the comments, viewing them as dismissive of the legends who built the foundation of the modern game. For him, this isn't just about eras. It's about respect for the history of basketball. The backlash grew so intense that social media turned the discussion into a full-blown war over generations, with fans pointing out contradictions in how physical and soft the modern game is depending on the narrative. In the middle of all this, the irony is hard to ignore. LeBron has long been associated with the evolution of player empowerment and rest culture in the NBA. Yet now he finds himself criticized for the very trends he helped normalize. At the same time, younger players are being pulled into the debate, framing the issue as a clash between old-school toughness and modern efficiency. And as the conversation continues to escalate, it has turned what started as a podcast discussion into one of the most polarizing basketball debates in recent memory. Guard. He built his dominance on the exact things LeBron criticized as easy in today's game: post-up mastery and a mid-range arsenal that feels straight out of 1995. While most players today are spacing the floor and relying on foul calls, he is attacking the paint and knocking down turnaround jumpers that make people wonder if Tim Duncan is somehow guiding him from the shadows. The message he is sending is simple. He is intentionally playing an old-school style as a direct response to the idea that modern basketball is more complex or superior. And the most shocking part of all this is that while LeBron is trying to defend his narrative on a podcast, the legends of the game, the true icons of basketball history, are quietly showing support for Victor Wembanyama in a way that feels almost like a passing of the torch. It is the kind of respect that only comes when the greatest voices in the sport start aligning behind one player, almost like they are correcting the conversation in real time. We are talking about a level of approval that hasn't been seen since Kobe's era, where the respect of former legends meant everything. It feels like the basketball world collectively reacted to LeBron's comments by doubling down on tradition and finding someone who embodies it. And when you get the full backing of Charles Barkley, you know the debate has officially exploded beyond control. Just this May, Barkley went on a passionate rant where he used Wembanyama as the centerpiece to challenge the idea that today's game is automatically harder. And in doing so, he indirectly pushed the entire conversation into a new level of intensity that now sits directly opposite LeBron's viewpoint.
And this guy is like 4 inches taller, and he's athletic. It can shoot threes. I mean, it is a beautiful thing.
But if you want to talk about a complete 180, you have to look at Shaquille O'Neal. There was a time when Shaq was one of the loudest critics of Wembanyama, constantly questioning whether he was anything more than a tall, skilled prospect rather than a truly dominant force. He didn't hold back at all, and the skepticism followed Victor early in his rise. But fast forward to 2026, and the narrative has completely flipped. Shaq has now taken a dramatic turn, openly praising Wembanyama and even going as far as calling him the first perfect big man in the history of basketball. That shift didn't just surprise fans. It reshaped the entire conversation around Victor's place in the league, because when someone as dominant and outspoken as Shaq changes his stance that drastically, it signals that something real is happening on the court that can't be ignored.
He's changing how we're looking at the post position. Victor is bringing a different level of guard slash, small forward to the big man position.
But Shaq didn't just stop at praise. He even used Wembanyama as a way to publicly challenge LeBron's podcast comments, making it clear that in his view the right way to play basketball is still about dominating the paint, embracing physical contact, and controlling the interior rather than relying heavily on perimeter play. From Shaq's perspective, that is what separates real big men from the modern style LeBron was defending in that discussion. But it wasn't only former big men reacting. When Magic Johnson presented Wembanyama with the Magic Johnson Award back in April, he praised his maturity and basketball intelligence, pointing out how rare it is in today's game to see a young player with that level of serious, thoughtful approach to the sport, almost like he carries a mindset from a different era of basketball. You could tell Magic saw something familiar in him, a kind of old-school discipline and respect for the game that goes beyond social media or highlight culture. Even Kevin Garnett added to that sentiment, emphasizing Wembanyama's intensity and mentality, describing him as a player with the kind of competitive fire that many feel is becoming less common in the modern league. Taken together, these voices are being framed as a larger message about where the league is heading, and in that narrative, Wembanyama becomes the symbol of a return to traditional dominance and mentality, in contrast to the ongoing debate sparked by LeBron's comments.
It's a different game now. It's a totally different game. And, it's a lot of soft tissue injuries that's happened now because of it.
But while it's one thing to have legends in your corner, it's another thing entirely to step on the floor and actually outwork the player many people consider the face of the league. Because while LeBron focuses on recovery protocols and maintaining his brand longevity, Victor Wembanyama is building a reputation for a level of obsession that feels almost old school in its intensity. The most striking thing about him isn't just his 7 feet 4 inches frame or his wingspan. It's the way he approaches the game with a mindset that feels more like a throwback to another era. While many young stars are distracted by fame, social media, and off-court attention, Wembanyama has developed a routine centered around discipline, focus, and constant improvement. He has been described as someone who spends his off hours studying the game, refining his mental approach, and treating basketball less like a career and more like a lifelong craft. That kind of mindset is exactly why comparisons to legends like Kobe Bryant keep coming up, because it reflects the same level of relentless commitment to mastery. Even moments that go viral, like him showing emotion after a big win, are interpreted differently depending on perspective. Some fans see it as pressure, but others view it as the emotional release of a player who invests completely in every possession, similar to what has been said about legends like Michael Jordan in the most intense moments of his career. At the same time, Wembanyama's approach to health and preparation is often contrasted with today's load management era. Rather than using rest as a strategic tool for preservation, his reputation is built around maximizing availability and pushing his conditioning to handle the demands of a full season. That contrast fuels the broader debate about how the modern game is played versus how it used to be. Statistically, his dominance is also part of what intensifies the conversation. When a young player produces historic-level performances, the narrative naturally expands beyond just talent and starts touching legacy territory. Games where he posts elite scoring, rebounding, and defensive impact in the same night only add fuel to the idea that he represents a different kind of two-way force, one that blends modern skill with old-school physical presence. That combination of mentality and production is what has made the discussion around him so polarizing. For some, he represents the future of the league and a return to a more complete style of basketball. For others, he is simply the latest evolution of a game that continues to change with each generation. Either way, the contrast between Wembanyama's rise and LeBron's legacy has turned what started as a podcast comment into one of the most debated basketball narratives in recent memory.